What's going on, football fans? It's me, J.R. Clark, back with a final truck thought for this 2021 season. It's finally over, done. Year one is in the books, and now we get to spend an off season dissecting it, talking about it, figuring out if it was worth it. What do we do from here? Where do we go from here? What were some of the highs? What were some of the lows? But after the game yesterday, it got me thinking that what I would like to have seen maybe was a little more fight, I guess. There have been a handful of times this year that the team didn't necessarily look as prepared as I wanted them to be. But it's really hard to evaluate that because this roster, as a lot of people have said, as we have talked about many times over, this roster was not a good one. Outside of a few key players, this roster was full of backups. I mean, dead serious. Outside of Ryan, Grady, and AJ Terrell, that's kind of really about it. The other guys on this roster were a lot of bit players. Foye was the standout player this year. Really hope that we can bring him back. By the end of the season, Fabian Moreau looked okay. Looked like he was serviceable, like what we had expected out of him. In all honesty, had you told me at the beginning of, or the end of last season, beginning of this season, however you want to frame it, that Arthur Smith would have to deal without the top two pass catching options, having to solely rely on Russell Gage and rookie tight end Kyle Pitts to, be an offense. Had you told me that Cordell Patterson would have been our most, potent scoring option, man, and then you would have told me we had 7 wins, I'd have been shocked. I don't know if I'd have believed you. And before you get on me with this whole, JR, all we beat were the bad teams, so what? We're a bad team. We were definitely a bad team this year. So we beat the other bad teams. And, we weren't really in any games with any good teams. But that's because the talent disparity was much different. And anybody who wants to deny that, we're not watching the same games, For all you people who want to, ship off Matt Ryan this offseason, ESPN came out with a report that made it sound like Ryan was going to be back. And then Arthur Smith and Matt Ryan, neither one really wanted to commit, per se. Ryan said he wanted to be here. And Arthur Smith said that they weren't going to back themselves into a corner. And so unless somebody comes with a good offer, if you got a Denver, I made jokes on Twitter, about Drew Lock. So, if you had Denver coming at you with a first and Drew Lock, you might consider that maybe and taking on some of Ryan's salary. But you're not just going to dump Ryan to save $8 million in cap space. That ain't going to happen. So more than likely Ryan will be back and we'll get to argue about Matt Ryan again for another year. You had some good in this season, though. You kind of started to see the foundation and the type of ball that Arthur Smith wants to play. A physical type ball. To borrow an old phrase from Tennessee, probably somewhere where he kind of learned it from, that exotic smash mouth. He wants to be able to run the ball and, throw that play action off of it. It didn't necessarily manifest this year because the O-line was horrible. I would have liked to seen different coaching changes there. Not coaching changes, but I would like to have seen them try out different players at the right tackle and left guard position particularly. Maybe giving Drew Dahlman a couple games before going back to Hennessy. So, hopefully those are coaching decisions that will be learned from this year, going in the next. But I'm definitely not ready to write off this coaching staff. I've seen some things that I liked, especially early on in the season. Before Ridley went down, we were actually converting quite well in the red zone. But once you really lost that threat, man, it was tough at that point. Nobody feared Russell Gage, and all you had to do was key in on where's Kyle Pitts at. Hayden Hurst never really did emerge like we were hoping he was going to. And the run game never really did take off. You had a stretch there where you were stringing together 3 and 4 games to see, in a row with a 100 yards rusher. So they rode that Mike Davis train, but even he admitted on Twitter, Instagram, whichever one it was, that he had his worst season. He's just not a starter, guys. I'm sorry. He's a number 2 back who couldn't live up to a number 1 role. So now let's see if we can get a dynamic back in the draft. Pair him with Quadre and Cordell. Do they bring Cordell back? That'll be interesting to see. So we got a lot to talk about this offseason. Definitely keep an eye on the channel. Definitely check out the website, p4patl.com. Me and Toby will have boots on the ground at the Senior Bowl, bringing y'all information and hopefully interviews and stuff like that from the players. So this draft season is going to be a lot of fun, and this offseason is going to be fun, and I hope y'all ride with us. As always, y'all can catch me on Twitter. I'm at Grim1128, GRIMM1128. Catch all of our stuff on poundforpoundatl.com. Catch our live streams on YouTube. We'll holla at you.